Hey folks, thanks for coming back for another lesson. Today we're just going to review the face and go over some stuff that I assume if you've watched any of my lessons prior to this, you should know by now. I like to go over things that I think I know over and over again to make sure that I understand them through and through. So I'm going to get you guys into the same habit if you're going to follow me, alright? With no further ado, before I do any self-promotion, let's just get into the video, make this one nice and short today. As I mentioned, I've been stressing some of these rules as I've been teaching you along, and by now you may or may not be familiar with them. They're quite easy to remember, keep in the back of your brain while you're drawing and constructing your designs from here on out. So using both a male and female model, I'll demonstrate and emphasize the point I'm trying to make here. Another thing to note, these illustrations I've copied off of photographs, and that has allowed me to get, I guess, the closest anatomical line drawing I could. So you can consider that all of these proportions are actually anatomically correct according to an actual human face. What you already should know by now, and what I'm going to stress if you don't, is the relationships between the different portions of your face, okay? So starting with your eyes from a profile view, in the center portion of your eyeball, you're going to draw a straight line down, and if you've done everything correctly, it should line up with the corner of your mouth, I may have mentioned. And as you can see, even on the trace of the photograph, it lines up fairly close to that area. If you move just inside to the left of the area I've selected there to where the eye duct would be, and you draw a straight line down, you should find that the area underneath it lines up with the nostril area of the person you're drawing as well. Okay? It varies. It's not perfect, but more or less, these relationships are here, and they've been taught to us as artists that draw a lot of anatomy, so that you can quickly find, like this is almost a schematic for how to get the right calculation between the proportions of the face. If you keep moving over to the left here, you're going to notice, and I mentioned this before, this is a good indication that the forehead does not protrude any further than the chin area. So that doesn't have to be exact, but keep it in mind. If something starts to look wonky on your design and it doesn't look anatomical anymore, that might be one of the reasons. I've always found that forehead protrusion is a bit in the face you have to kind of play with, and again, understanding how the skull works beneath it helps you to place all these things correctly. Another thing I wanted to note is there's an area here beneath the nose where the nasal spine is, okay? That's technically the bottom of the nasal bone area. If you were to draw more or less a straight line back, okay, to the back of your cranium, you're going to find that it lines up where your cranium meets your spinal column. Okay, goes all the way back there and then wraps up into that cranium shape, which gives your forehead and your cranium the shape that it has. Okay. As I mentioned in prior videos, it's brain shaped. If we look at the nose now, it comes out and forms off of the nasal bone, which on our character here would be right about here. Okay, and then the cartilage portion of the nose juts out, right? And that angle in the bridge of the nose there almost naturally forms if we've drawn the cranium shape on our profile view, and then the nasal bone jutting out from the anatomical area. Okay, now that we have all that, we also have an area for our eye. We know that our eye lid pretty much is level with that area where the cranium dips in to the bridge of the nose on a profile view. Okay. Another thing I've mentioned is this beautiful relationship from the tip of the nose to the tip of the chin, where our subject's nose meets up along that line on 4 different points: the top lip, bottom lip, the chin, and then the tip of the nose, of course. And as I mentioned before, this is an illustration over top of a photograph. So the fact that these relationships add up, even in like a photograph, of an actual human being, this is the proof in the pudding that it works, and why you should always use it, and why you'll always see the strength in professionals' work, because they use these tricks subconsciously. The line underneath her mouth, okay, that I'm drawing there is going straight to the meeting point of her ramus and her mandible in her jawbone, okay? And I want to always, when I'm drawing a face from a profile view, from the front, whatever, keep that line and that information well under the mouth area, okay? And just before we're all done with the profile view and its proportions, we want to figure out where the ear is. Well, because the ear is setting, if you think about it, the ear is actually closest to our view, right? And then there's like a level beneath it, and a level beneath that, right? And then the furthest thing away from us is like where her eye and all these divots of her face are, correct? So, as I've mentioned in prior videos, if you take the space at the top of the eyebrow, bring it back, and the space at the bottom of the nose and bring it back, it should give you a space for where the ear naturally sets in, okay? And according to my measurements, it's right about there where I've drawn it. But if we look at the drawing there, if we look at the drawing over the photograph there, we can see that naturally her ear is forming in that area. She has very tiny ears, you can see. So, these principles work. I've got another one for you today that maybe you haven't used before, okay? Top of the forehead I've mentioned. I like to give it a line, but if you draw a straight line from where your mandible meets your throat, okay, and we're going to get to how the throat connects in just a second. If you draw that straight up, you should get more or less an area where your forehead starts. But I don't want you to think about it like that. You should think about a forehead in a biological sense. You should have an eye. Now that you have all these areas kind of defined, you got to start having an eye for how big you give a forehead to a character. And this is all going to play off of how big you gave their cranium in the first place, okay? But the point I'm trying to make is there are a multitude of foreheads, okay? We know that there's a widow's peak, correct? We know there's the eyes. That's a widow's peak. We know there's a dominant forehead. And there's the eyes. We know there's a recessant forehead. It's just flat across. There's the eyes. These are all different. Here, I better give them faces. So this is more like Maleficent. This is more like me. This is more like every cute dude you ever liked, girls. And, even girls, they have their own version of a recessant hairline, which is more like that. Anyhow, like hers would be a perfect example of a female recessant hairline. So get familiar with those biological terms. Learn how people's hair usually wraps around their forehead. There's only a few ways across all ethnicities, okay? Learn those, and that'll help you to understand how to draw foreheads better. Because beyond this measurement from a profile view, I really don't know how to calculate what a proper forehead should look like. To me, it's more important that you draw everything else anatomically correct, and then you have the right areas in the face designated for your proportions, correct? So getting back to the point here, the last point I want to make on a profile view is it comes right to this area here where the nasal bone is, okay? This nasal bone, if you draw a straight line from it down to the collarbone, more or less lines up with where her throat is, okay? So if you're ever having an issue putting a head on a throat and a neck, okay, that's one way you can figure out the front area of it. If you look even at me right now, if you were to take a straight line and draw it from my nasal bone right down to my collarbone, it kind of gives, you know what I mean? And I draw a lot of my characters almost in this 3/4 view that you're looking at me at, right? So anyhow, show you how this works on a guy the exact same way. We'll just go really quick through his profile view. The centers of the eyes line up with the corners of the mouth, the tear ducts with the corners of the nostrils, tops of the eyebrow, nearly where the tip of the top of the ear is. Same with the bottom of the nose and where the bottom of the ear is. Okay? The forehead, look at that. Straight line from the tip of where the chin and the throat meet to that furthest area, basically. That area where I've mentioned in the past, as you're drawing the cranium on a character from a profile view, there's an area where it starts to, it's not flat, right? His forehead is not flat. It very slowly resides, and then it's no longer a forehead. It's now the top of his cranium, okay? So that point exactly where those two playing fields meet, where those two areas meet, you draw it straight back to that area right under here, you get the hairline, okay? And this character I've given a recessant hairline to, okay? If that's any consolation to you. Already going on 13 minutes here. I do not know how to keep these things quick. The jawline underneath his mouth. Alright. The nasal bone to his collarbone. Nice, right? Bottom of his nose to the back of his cranium, where the spine connects. From the front, the only other relationships we need to really pay attention to are the width of the mouth, width of the chin. Okay, they're relatively identical. And this, I guess, to get the correct spacing between here and the correct spacing between here and the correct spacing between there and the bottom of the chin, I wouldn't go crazy trying to put some mathematical equation to it or figuring it out the way I've tried to explain the rest of the face. This is more or less where your creativity comes in, and it's where your touch as an artist and your sensitivity for what can fit into spaces that you've drawn in structurally. That's where you come in to articulate. That's your style, and you don't always have to give your character the full lips and the full details around, Small indications will get the idea across, but I don't have an exact method for how to determine certain areas in the face. I just build each object and then give them a space between the next object I draw. I'm showing you how I do that, and I kind of always end up with a good result. But I also understand the skull beneath the skin and the muscle too. So in conjunction with learning all of those things, you always will come out with a pretty cool looking character. And people are going to see the knowledge you have drawn right into it. I won't bother going through the proportions from a profile, excuse me, a 3/4 or a frontal view, because I think we understand it at this point. You can really demonstrate all of these lessons, or excuse me, you can really demonstrate all of these principles by the demonstration I've given on the profile view alone. But you can see how the relationship carries on from a 3/4 to a frontal view. You know, it never changes. Now, maybe in a frontal view like this, you'd wonder why her ear's so tucked back, but we have to remember that, you know, just like when we were drawing the profile view with her ear being closest to us and her eyes and nose being furthest away, it's the same principle here, where her cheekbones are now way in front, like a couple of inches in front of where her ear is. Her hair's even in front of her ears. This little strand of hair, it's in front of her ear, you know. So we just tuck it back in there. So it's almost like it's it's almost like, yeah, this area from the top of her eyebrow to the bottom of her nostril can fit the ear, right? But it actually goes back in space a bit, right? Like so. You got to start thinking about that too, you know? Just how things are moving around. It'll get you more comfortable with foreshortening. Anyhow, what was intended for a 5-minute video is now turned into 17 minutes. Of course, I don't know how to stop when I get going. But I think there were a lot less ums and uhs and okay going on in today's video. So there's plenty of so's though. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do it. Well, thanks for watching, people. It's been a pleasure. If you haven't done it already, please make sure to subscribe below and check me out on all my social media. I'm on Instagram, Reddit, YouTube here, and Twitch. I stream on Twitch 3 nights a week, Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays from 6 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, you know, I'll just keep slinging these little lessons your way. In my opinion, it's little tidbits like this that help, you know. A lesson a day, a little way to think about something different once a day. And then after a while, after you practice them, you'll see how they all start working together. And then, you know, you become a problem solver on top of being a great illustrator too. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.